When arranging for meal times, what matters more is the quality of attention the adults are giving the children and the children give each other, more than whether the food is perfect or whether everything is perfectly set, just to make sure that what's always being prioritized is attention. If we don't protect our attention in thoughtful ways, it will be outcompeted by so much of the other things.
Before we get started, if you enjoy these episodes, you might want to check out more at OptimalWork.com. Our website offers unique content, tools, and exercises to help you thrive at work and beyond. We have an in-depth masterclass covering our entire theory of growth, daily recommendations for personalized advice, and a platform to help groups and organizations learn and practice optimal work together. You can get a free trial at OptimalWork.com. Now let's start the episode. Hey, this is Sharif here with another episode of the Optimal Work podcast, joined by Dr. Kevin Majeres. Kevin, good to be back here with you in the new year.
Hey, Sharif, thanks for having me back. It's great to be here.
Yeah. We were thinking, with the new year, we might have a new expert, but no, we wanted Kevin back. So yeah, it's good.
Good. Well, so at least for the time being, then we'll keep this up.
Yeah, I think so. And I thought, we could start this year with kind of an important concept, which is optimal work in the home. And, it's interesting. Sometimes we talk about the most important golden hour, and is, the first hour of work of the day is really important. But I think you said the most important hour is the first hour after work, when you get home, and how do you treat your loved ones? And so I think it's great that we can dive into that topic.
Yeah, that's great. Let's dig in. I think that home maybe is the place where we most want to be ourselves, and so we can be unfiltered and unshaped. And I think that doesn't bring out the best in anyone. But I think that we can have a more thoughtful approach, and that allows us to be thinking and considering, how could I prepare myself to actually give my best at home? And then how can the home I create bring out the best in everyone there?
Yeah. So we're going to use as our kind of guide for this episode, Dia Boyle's recent book, The Thoughtful Home, which I got my copy a little while ago, and I was surprised to see on the back of it a blurb from none other than Dr. Kevin Majeres, which was kind of cool,
And none of us told Dia that we were going to do this episode, so I hope it's a nice surprise. But Dia is a friend of my family going back for decades. And I was especially close with my sister Jill, and she was really a mentor to my sister Jill over the years. And so I'm grateful for everything she's done for my family. And when she came out with this book, I was very happy to read it and review it, and I loved it. It's a real call for everyone to be thinking about the kind of home life we're creating, and what does it really mean to make a home. Anyway, so we can dive into that.
Yeah. So, what is a home, Kevin?
Yeah, she continually is asking this question, like, what is a home? Because it's not just a place where we live and where we take care of the needs of the body, like where you're getting fed and you have shelter, and then there's someone to take you to all of your sporting events and school events in school. So this idea that's just like dealing with the necessities of life, the home has to be more than that.
It's like a bed and breakfast plus an Uber.
Exactly. It has to be more than just that. And basically, there's this idea that the home is where you are individually loved and cared for. That there are people present who are thinking about your needs and how they can help you to be your best. And the home is a place of real comprehensive care and concern, that they don't want to just see you flourishing nutritionally or academically, which is different than, say, a hospital or a kind of boarding school. But they want to see you also thriving emotionally, and spiritually, and in every other way you can say. So it's the institution dedicated to comprehensive human flourishing that is individualized, and you receive the attention not because you've earned it, but simply because of who you are. that is because of your place in this family.
That's great. So I'd love to kind of dig into how this relates to optimal work, because
Hmm.
one of the things that we always talk about so much about is challenge. And
Yeah.
are you challenging yourself? And flourishing and growth come from challenge. And I think when it's just isolated, in the context of work, people could get the misconception of challenge means, being super disciplined and organized and ordered. And then they could think that, well, home life in this totally challenging environment would be more like a military barracks where, everything is difficult, everything is challenging. But I think the home really gives a picture of challenge and flourishing that's much more what we're going for with optimal work.
Yeah, and I think the challenge in home life is, I think, to be thoughtful, which she never uses the phrase being mindful, as far as I remember. But that's, I think, that what she's talking about in a way is, what is the quality of attention that we pay to those who are closest to us? And in optimal work, we think that the reason to have mastery over your attention and to be able to shape it through definite actions throughout the day is so that when you're with your loved ones, you can give your very best to them. So that's why we always want to be shaping our attitude and attention and actions so that we can really give our best to those that are closest to us. And it's very easy when we're with people to not really pay attention to them. And that really is the role of the homemaker, of those in charge of the home, to give this thoughtful, loving attention to each of the home's members. And so I think that the idea is like that really being a homemaker is a profession. It has its skills, it has its knowledge, it has this form of being trained and making good judgments. But fundamentally, it comes down to the quality of attention that's paid to the members of the home.
Yeah, I mean, how do you then balance this thing of, making the home a place where people are cared for, where people can flourish, but also where they're challenged? I mean, is that the responsibility
Mhm.
of the homemaker to challenge the members of the home, the members of the family?
In a way, yes, because the challenge is to make the home, and everyone has a role to play in that challenge. Maybe the number one thing that she focuses on, I mean, she doesn't give a lot of prescriptions. It's more about helping people to be reflecting on the quality of the attention that they're building in their home life. But there are some real nuggets of best practices. One best practice that I like that gets to this idea of challenge is to make the private spaces less attractive and comfortable than the common areas. And the idea is you want to challenge people to gather together. But if you have the comfortable reading chair and the best light, in say a bedroom, then you're not going to get people together. So that would, for me, was that is a point I took to heart. To be really committed to in the common areas, things we share, the patio, the living room, and all these areas, the kitchen and dining room, to be making sure that those are very attractive and that's where people want to be, so that they're being challenged to not be withdrawn into their own things, but to get out of themselves and to really give their availability and attention to others. So that's one of the first things. The second one that's really big is the importance of the family meal. Yeah, and in that, she does strongly encourage trying to see how many nights a week you can have a protected time for the family meal. Um, I think that there has been a lot of research in this area, and so when it comes to things like depression and depressive disorders, clearly regular family meals are preventive of those. When it comes to suicidality and self-harm, regular family meals. Same with eating disorders, anxiety disorders, substance use disorders, maybe even attention deficit. So there's all these things that show not only that there's a correlation, but also that there is a dose response curve. So the more frequently the family has meals together, the more protective it is against all of those different psychiatric illnesses. Um, so I think that's hugely important. But more than simply the quantity or the frequency of family meals. Really what matters is the quality.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say quality.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that like any kind of like in everything, quantity goals take energy, but quality goals give energy. And we trade off then. If you had zero quantity goals, well, then there'd be nothing to give energy to. And so you couldn't have really high quality attention if there's no family meals together, at least as far as, attention at the meals goes. But if you are really focusing on high quality attention, well, then the more the better, to be think of quality and quantity working together. And she's very realistic that for where many families are, maybe the main thing is to have a very good Sunday brunch together and at least have that one meal. One really good meal is always well worth it. And that has its own impact. But the more, the better.
Yeah. And I also love the idea of having a quiet space in the house where, for study time or for homework or for work. So that's because, you're trying to do homework and your siblings are all running around making noise and it's impossible to focus. So I like the idea, that combines really like the care that, by providing that study space for kids, you're caring for them, but then also you're helping them to challenge themselves in their work to actually do good work.
Yeah, that's right. And it takes some thinking, like, it could be that people experiment, for instance, with setting up the furniture in the living room with conversation in mind more than television viewing. It could be that it's better to have, for instance, she doesn't say this, this is in my thinking, it's better to have a study room and then have multiple children in one bedroom. So at least like perhaps segregated right by sex, but to have like a boys' room and a girls' room, and then to actually have a room dedicated just to study, rather than prioritizing that everyone have their own individual room. As just another example.
Before we continue, a brief message. If you're benefiting from these discussions, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe. Doing so helps us to reach more people. So you're not just learning, you're also helping others to discover a path of growth and flourishing. Thanks for your support. Are there studies on that of like individual rooms versus shared rooms in kids growing up?
That's a great question. I've never looked into it. But I think that and she actually thinks it's better that children share rooms so that you don't have the sense that like your room is your private preserve against socializing with your family members.
Yeah. My annoying siblings.
Yeah, because eventually if people like get married and have kids, well, you don't have your own private room. You're always sharing a room with someone. And so it's like, maybe that's a skill that's better to learn when you're young, than when you're old.
Right. So, I think we cover this a lot in various episodes, is technology. And obviously it's kind of particularly important in the home. We talk about it a lot in work, obviously people are working on their computers and getting emails and, tempted to check their phone all the time. But then in the context of the home life, I like that point that you mentioned earlier of, for instance, orienting the living room so that not all the chairs are just pointed at the TV, but that they're oriented to facilitate a conversation. So I don't know if we have anything else along those lines.
She's very strong on the idea that screens are always to the detriment of family life. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. People viewing their phones or tablets during meals is to the detriment of family life. And people spending a lot of time in their own like private spaces, on screens. So she thinks that children shouldn't have screens in private spaces. There should be something that if it's done kind of in the common areas, and that it's the kind of the goods that are served by protecting attention are powerful and real, but they can't compete with the internet. They can't compete with every conceivable television show and movie or YouTube video. There's too many things that outcompete what matters. And so screens have to be seen, I think, as potential competition to higher goods. And so if you want to, develop deeply as a person, well, then having, you know, certain practices of quiet time, of meditating, of reading, well, screens can very much be the detriment of that. And how could a time of meditating ever compete with your favorite show? So, and if you're always reading social media and scrolling, how can that, how does reading a good book compete with that? So we always have to be aware that screens have a tendency to outcompete other things, and that only has to do with their effect on our dopamine system and nothing to do with the actual good that they're giving us. And so I think if you're thinking of the quality time of the family together, if one person in the family has their phone out and is paying attention to that instead of the others, you could just stop the quality time clock until the phones are put away. And so it's a good practice, I think, in families to make it the norm that phones are not out. Now, I don't know if family needs like super tight rules, but at least make it the norm. That the expectation we all have is that when we're together, we actually prefer being together to looking at screens. Um, and that means even like, when parents have small children, they do need to be careful about what message are they giving. If they're always looking at a screen when they're taking care of the child, there needs to be this quiet bonding time as well.
Yeah. So and reading too, right? I mean, reading together, helping children to
Yeah,
develop the habit of reading. So
exactly. And so making sure that, and she's also very big in that, good lighting, good, chairs to be reading it in common areas, um, prominent display of books throughout the house. So I don't know, so if you had, uh, this could be great too if you're thinking of like a study room. Well, that could be, like a little bit of a library or something. That this shows that no, as a family we really prioritize. Now I understand that people don't always have a lot of freedom in how many rooms they have in their house. I'm saying that it would be great though to be thinking of what commitments can we make even in the use of space that shows that we actually think reading is really important. We think that studying is really important. We think that playing games together as a family is really important. So is there a good table that's uncluttered? It could be in a dining room, but where this is just natural for people to come together and play games together. But to be kind of working against individualism and working against the overly packed schedule also, that kind of takes people into their own private things away from the common life of the family.
so yeah, because it's about how do you prioritize these different things, and that's what the thoughtful home is all about. Being thoughtful about
Yeah.
what you actually want to prioritize and how you build the right culture within your home.
Yeah.
So my sense is that's like the main thrust of the book is being thoughtful about the culture you're
Yeah.
developing within the home, right?
Exactly. And so it's, she doesn't really get into the question of does a homemaker need to be full-time at home? And but she says that homemaking is definitely a profession. So it requires at least adequate time on the part of, the homemaker, assuming that in every family there's one person that is kind of taking on the responsibility of staying at home. So I think this idea that you need to have adequate time to be noticing should anything be going wrong, to be noticing what people need, that you have adequate time to think about the people in your home. And so that means not being excessively busy, not being excessively distracted, and so so when arranging for meal times, what matters more is the quality of attention the adults are giving the children and the children give each other, more than whether the food is perfect or whether everything is perfectly set. And so just to make sure that what's always being prioritized is attention. If we don't protect our attention in thoughtful ways, it will be outcompeted by so much of the other things. But she also thinks that you could be, as a homemaker, also doing a job, and you could be having this time on the commute to be thinking through things. You could be making sure that when your children are studying at in the evenings, and you have quiet time to read, that you're thinking and observing too. To think, and there needs to be someone who is really strategizing how the home life can bring out the best in every individual in that home. And that needs some amount of time, but no prescriptions are really given as to how much time does it actually take. And I like that about it.
Yeah. So, well, Kevin, I think we've kind of covered a lot of the contents of the book and the main thrust of Dia's ideas. I wonder if you could give us a little of your thoughts of how it fits with optimal work, or what advice maybe optimal work would give to help someone be a more effective homemaker.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing that I think, is just to think of how does it tie into, we focus a lot on the ambition we have to serve, and thinking about how can we grow the most, and sometimes we talk about the idea of, thinking of the impact that we're going to make in the world at large. How are we serving the common good? And it's interesting to be thinking of in terms of the kind of how we set challenges for ourselves. What does success mean in our life? We have this wonderful exercise on OptimalWork.com called True Success. And it's very much focused on home life because it's thinking about what are the bad habits we all have, but specifically to ourselves, what's the bad habits that I have that I need to be fighting against? And then what are the ideals that I really want to shape my life? And in optimal work, we say that that's actually where true success lies. It's the ideals that we bring into our most important relationships. And from there, we have the ideals to bring into our work. And then you can see, like, okay, if I can be, say, thoughtful and caring at home, well, even in the way I'm working, maybe I could approach it more thoughtfully. Maybe I could care more about the service I'm providing. So you could practice being thoughtful and caring in the daytime, and that just reinforces how thoughtful and caring you are at home. But what I was just say is that I think that there's this idea we have that real growth involves prioritizing the bonds in our life, because those bonds are the setting for growing in ideals. Those ideals then shape what kind of skills and knowledge we acquire, and that determines the impact that we make. So we want to have this kind of intensive growth, that love or charity is like the highest of the ideals. And then from there, everything else comes out. Versus thinking simply in terms of the outcomes. Like I want to make a big impact on the world. I want to start a nonprofit, that will better the lives of thousands of people. Well, that might all be consequences, but we don't focus on the extension or extensive quality, but instead it's more the intensive. And that's, anyway, so I think this idea that if we focus on ourselves, on ideals, on bonds, there's a ripple effect that creates then help for those around us and the culture around us.
Yeah. And it seems like at the home, it can be particularly easy to get, you could say hyper-focused on getting particular things done, tasks and chores around the home. And there's always this very noble reframe available to people of seeing the people behind the tasks, seeing what they're doing in light of the service that they're providing to the people that they love the most, as opposed to just seeing it as something, I have to get this thing done.
Yeah, and I think for all of us, the most important task we have in life is actually the home we create. That in some way, I think we live for others. And this is true of everyone. And so in some way we're taking care of others as well. Unless, I don't know, one is called to be a hermit or to live completely apart from human society, which may be an even high, that could be a very high calling. So nothing against hermits, but the ordinary situation, right, is that, and what is true for the most, is that real greatness comes in learning to protect the attention and the bonds we have with others, to use those as real channels for every ideal. And in some way, the reason for learning to do our work at our best and to bring our highest ideals into our work is that's what allows us then to actually give our best to those closest to us.
Wonderful, Kevin. Well, I think that's a great note for us to end on here. We're basically out of time.
Great. Well, thank you, Sharif. And thanks to Dia Boyle also for writing this wonderful book.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we'll be back next week. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and you're looking for more in-depth guidance, check out OptimalWork.com, our unique platform that delivers content, tools, and exercises to help you thrive at work and beyond.